As I was looking at the gospel, I was reminded of myself as a 14-year-old, and I remember the book by Hal Lindsey, The Late Great Planet Earth, and I looked it up on Amazon. It's still there for sale, a bit dated, but sold over 2 million copies, and I think I was one of them. Now, I was thinking, how did God reach me? And when I was so young, at 14, and we're losing so many of the young people. They're losing interest in the church, and then if they don't leave us when they're in high school, they often leave us in college. And so I was trying to think of a way to deal with that. And now, at the time, I was fairly well satisfied with Thomas Aquinas and his proofs for God's existence, the uncaused cause, the unmoved mover, things like that. That convinced me. But I don't think it's going to work on this crowd. This crowd's much tougher. The kids of today, they're very much into all these visual things. And so I found a couple of interesting videos which I want to recommend to you. One of them, I don't know if it's going to prove anything to anybody, but it's interesting for people who go to church to watch. It's only about 7 minutes. It's called The Veil Removed. And in the video, people are coming into Mass just like we did today. And as the priest gets to the Sanctus, the Holy, 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 angels show up around him and they're singing. So the idea is the veil is removed to the other side, to the spiritual world. And that's kind of the idea of the mural here. If you look up top, you see the veil is removed and the heavens are open. You can see God the Father and the angels up there. So as the Eucharistic prayer progresses, when it gets to the time of the words of consecration, the priest disappears and he's replaced by Christ. Because the understanding is that Christ himself is the priest, and he uses the voice and the hands of the human priest, which in this case is me, but he is the one who works the miracle of changing the bread and the wine into the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. There's only one priest, and it's Christ. So we are called priests because of the sacrament of holy orders that Christ uses us to be his instruments through which his graces flow. And so the priest acts in persona Christi in Latin, meaning in the person of Christ. Similar to how parents, through the sacrament of matrimony, they become, we use the word procreation. So God is the one who's creating, but he does so through his human instruments of the married couple, or at least hopefully married couple. So it goes along, and then Christ appears on the cross. So we, of course, have Christ on the cross over when the Mass is going on. And so the idea of the connection with the sacrifice and the Mass. And so the blood drips down from Christ on the cross and lands in the chalice. And then you see the saints up there, and it opens even further and goes on up into the heavens and more angels. Similar to our mural, actually. So if you look at it, it's called The Veil Removed. You can find it on YouTube. Now, another one that's very good is called Evidence for the Shroud of Christ, Resurrection 2021. So that one, they've apparently, using newer technology, have uncovered a few more things about the radiation involved and how the 3D image, is of the body of Christ, and he was weightless. And they've been able to construct a statue, actually, of Christ based on the shroud. It's pretty impressive. So with the new technology, they're getting more and more out of the shroud. And the other one is called Our Lady of Guadalupe, and that one's by a guy named Dan Bruschi. And so you can probably remember his name, because that's probably what a lot of guys say when they come home from work. Honey, I'm home. I'm going in the kitchen for a brewski. So his name's Dan Bruschi. But he does a good job going through the history, and it's quite amazing, the history of the Aztecs and the brutal murdering and human sacrifice that was going on back then. And if any of you have seen Mel Gibson's movie Apocalypto, you know a little bit about it. Now, I was actually there at one of the temples, one of the pyramids, and because it was part of the shore trip from one of my cruises I was on. Father Cotter and I were there, And it was pretty kind of scary, I'd say. They were telling us about how they would keep people in chains, 16-year-old boys and girls, and they would go and take them to sacrifice them and murder them. It's pretty frightening, So the thing is, the idea of this murder is pretty bad news. So getting back to what I was saying in the beginning about our gospel. So the gospel says, it's talking about the fig tree. Now Jesus curses the fig tree, which is a symbol for Israel. And in the mural we have two fig trees. The cursed one, which is to the right of his feet, and then the blooming fig tree behind the head of Mary. So Hal Lindsey's book, The Late Great Planet Earth, he read this passage and he said, I got this figured out. So this generation will not pass away when the fig tree comes back. So he had a political interpretation of it, unfortunately for him. I like the guy, he seems well-intentioned, but he got it wrong. So generation is 40 years. So he calculated that if Israel became a nation in 48, Jesus should show up by 1988. Now, you probably are aware he didn't show up. So I, however, showed up at the seminary in 1988. So something happened anyway. So what is the true interpretation? Well, in my opinion, I'm not going to write a book on this. I'm just going to tell you what I think. So Romans 11 is the key to understanding today's gospel. So this is St. Paul writing here, Romans 11. He says, I'm speaking to you Gentiles inasmuch as I am the apostle to the Gentiles. So Paul is a Jewish convert to Christianity or Catholicism. So he says here, I glory in my ministry in order to make my race, the Jews, jealous and save some of them. For if their rejection, so what's their rejection? Well, they yelled, crucify him. So the one time in Scripture we have a vote, and they vote to crucify the Son of God. The majority voted that way. So don't always think because the majority votes some way, it's necessarily correct. So they voted to crucify. So verse 15, Romans 11 verse 15 is the key to understanding this gospel, I think. For if their rejection is the reconciliation of the world, in other words, Christ dies on the cross and the gospel is preached to the Gentiles, the non-Jews, and they are saved, what will their acceptance mean? Nothing less than life from the dead. So what is that? Life from the dead. That's the resurrection. So one of the signs of the end of the world is understood to be the conversion of the Jews to belief in Christ as the Messiah. And you'll see quite a few YouTube videos are on there of Jews that have converted. And it's interesting, a lot of them are talking about how they were forbidden to read Isaiah 53. That was something I asked you to read a couple of Sundays ago. And certain passages that point very powerfully to Christ. But they read those passages and they converted. Now, as we look at our first reading, we see a hint about the resurrection, because the resurrection is important. So we see here about the end times will be a time unsurpassed in distress, but only those who's found written in the book of life, will escape. So many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth, that would be the cemeteries, okay, will awake. Some shall live forever. Now that's what we want. We want the glorified body. The glorified body, we can eat potato chips all we want and never gain 1 pound. Guaranteed never to get sick again. And you can even walk through walls and fly like Superman. So all these kids that want to be superheroes, hold on a minute and keep following the Lord. Your glorified, resurrected body will give you all of that stuff better than Iron Man ever hoped for. So the glorified body will be a wonderful thing, forever young, never to age. Because why are we aging and getting sick? Because of sin, because of original sin. That's what got us into this mess. So Jesus, the new Adam, is reversing what the old Adam did. So he's going to get us back to paradise. That's what he promised the good thief. Today you'll be with me in paradise. So there'll be no more death, no more suffering, no more pain. But that's for the saved. What about the unsaved, the damned? What about their bodies? It says here, others will be in everlasting horror and disgrace. So yes, zombies are real, but not the way Hollywood has it. It's the body of the damned, the unsaved. They will arise as an everlasting horror and disgrace, a very frightening thing. And so who are these people? Well, it's the people that are giving us spiritual and moral horror and disgrace right now. The politicians, the Herods of the world, who hate the child in the womb and want to destroy them. The news media and Hollywood and their message that attacks the family, attacks the child in the womb, attacks the creation of God, of a family being a man and a woman, attacks us with impurity, with pornography and modest dress, all these messages that go against Christ. There's a reason Christ said, my kingdom is not of this world. So Hollywood, what do you see in Hollywood? Oh, we're the stars. Really? So they got the little stars on the sidewalk, right, in Hollywood? Well, I got news for them. Jesus says he's going to create a new heavens and a new earth and destroy this earth by fire. So those little stars are toast. However, it says here that the glorified and the saved, the wise shall shine brightly like the splendor in the firmament, and those who lead many to justice will be like the stars forever. So the saints and the angels are the real stars, and that stardom will never end. So being disciples of Christ makes us a true superstar. So the people in the world, they push this nonsense. Like so many of these shows that irritate me, like that thing called The View. I call it The View from Hell. Because, they are so against the child in the womb and against the natural order of marriage between a man and a woman. They are so in favor of immodesty and immorality of all kinds. They are totally against the gospel of Jesus Christ. If Jesus was on the show, they would argue with him. Well, I have news for them. There's another view, the view of God from heaven. And one day, their view from hell on earth and the view from heaven are going to meet, and they're going to lose big time. So for their sake, I hope they straighten out their act before they die. Because, it says here, it talks about those who will arise in everlasting horror and disgrace. No amount of makeup is going to cure the unsaved and the damned body from the everlasting horror and disgrace. So another thing I want to point out, many of you may have heard about what's called the 3 days of darkness. So let's look historically at it. There already was 3 days of darkness. So if we look here in the Bible, in Exodus chapter 10, verse 21, then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward the sky, that over the land of Egypt there may be such intense darkness that one can feel it. So Moses stretched out his hand toward the sky, and there was dense darkness throughout the land of Egypt for 3 days. Men could not see one another, nor could they move from where they were for 3 days. But all the Israelites had light where they dwelt. Now, we notice the Israelites had light, and the darkness was for 3 days. So the darkness for 3 days kind of was, in a sense, pointing to the 3 days where between Christ's death on the cross and his resurrection, where they were without Christ. Another thing I was going to tell you, that video, Our Lady of Guadalupe is our pro-life image of Mary. And just to show you how miraculous that is, on the video that I mentioned, Our Lady of Guadalupe, Dan Bruschi, when Mexican government, the Herods of our modern time, voted to legalize abortion, the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe suddenly had a light where the fetus is, because the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, she's pregnant with Jesus. So there was an image of a golden baby in the womb that appeared at the same time that they legally voted in favor of abortion going against God. A very sad moment, a moment of darkness and lies and death. And so the light appeared on Our Lady of Guadalupe, the image, as a reminder that they were going in the wrong direction. So the darkness is a scary thing. Now, this is not church teaching, but it is private revelation by a number of blessed and saints that before Christ comes again, there will be 3 days of darkness again. Now, keep in mind the context. So, in the book of Exodus, you have the 10 plagues. So what is the 10th plague? It's the death of the firstborn. It is a moment of judgment where God actively intervenes. The angel of death comes and kills the firstborn, which was probably hundreds, if not thousands, of dead Egyptians. And so that's when Pharaoh finally gave in and let Moses, Moses, let my people go. And he's like, go and you'll be doing me a favor. Get out of here. So I think before Christ comes again in the final judgment, because that was sort of a mini judgment on the world in anticipation, when God comes for the final judgment, maybe there will be 3 days of darkness that will come. Who knows? But supposedly we need to stay inside when it comes, and there will be all kinds of evil forces at work, demons outside. Anyone outside who doesn't come in with the warning of God, they're going to wind up perishing. So the idea is to be inside with blessed candles. If you bring candles, I'll be happy to bless them. But it's a good idea to have candles anyway. You know why? If you think you got enough batteries in your flashlights, they've been sitting there a while, they may be dead, when you need them. You get a blackout, it's always good to have candles, because that's what got the world through centuries. Okay, before we had batteries and flashlights, okay, and electricity, what do they have? Candles. Okay, it may be old, but it still works. So doesn't hurt to have a few candles in the house so that you can have some light at night if the power goes out, or if the 3 days of darkness happens. So our gospel today is speaking to us, letting us know, that He is coming. He will come. And again, whether we go to Him or He comes to us, comes out the same. So, in my mind, I can recall being in high school. It seems like only yesterday. That was the 70s, folks. To you that have been born recently, the 70s, didn't the dinosaurs still walk the earth? Yes. I didn't have Rover to go for a walk. I took my T-Rex out for a walk down the street. We had dinosaurs back then. So we didn't have cell phones. We had video games, but it was just Pac-Man. It was very primitive, sort of like the Gilligan's Island version of video games. So it was a different world back then. But in any event, now I'm almost 60. I'll be 60 next August, and I've got high blood pressure. So hopefully, hope he's listening. I'm hoping to stick around a while longer. But the fact of the matter is, we are all on the conveyor belt of time. Eventually, we're going to pop off into eternity. Again, whether we're here when Jesus comes back, or whether we die and go to Him, comes out the same. So we need to pray. We need to keep the commandments. We need to be ready at all times.